14 July 1943. Camp Crossville, Tennessee. 9:27 a.m. Under a scorching sun that made the tin sheets of the huts almost transparent from the heat. The strangest noise was not the sound of boots on the walkway, nor the rustling of uniforms. It was a small, effervescent whistle when the capsule popped and the bottle opened. Gefreiter Otto Bauer held it as one would hold a relic, fingers still stained with Saharan sand, the left nail split from a day of chores. He had never seen such liquid, brown, clear, sparkling, shining in the sun as if it had been bottled with the light itself. The foam crackled on the lips of the neck, and when he brought the bottle to his mouth, the world rearranged itself in an instant. "This is Coca-Cola," explained almost apologetically the guard at the other end of the table, Corporal James Miller, easy smile, American Army cap pushed down, red mustache. 500. Everyone drinks it. The kids buy it after school. The sentence, mundane to American ears, sounded like heresy in Otto's mind. In North Africa, one dreamed of a piece of chocolate, a fresh egg, coffee that wasn't black mud without sugar. Here, in the heart of the United States, the treasures he had heard about in his letters, ice cream, sugar, chocolate bars, were not rumours. They flickered, accessible, displayed at fixed prices in a military shop, within reach of a prisoner's daily wage. Around them, the camp was breathing. The heated shacks, running water, flush toilets, electric lights until late. So many technical details that the German soldiers noted in a mental notebook where two columns now lined up, what propaganda had said and what their eyes saw. On the mess hall table, open sugar bags, egg cartons, fresh bread. On the canteen shelves, Coca-Cola, Hershey, Mars bars, neatly arranged canned goods like well-drilled soldiers. The camp vendors exchanged candies for cigarettes, and the guards smiled, sometimes too much, as if they possessed a soft certainty that nothing terrible would come from a people sharing their sweets. The first sip was a small inner revolution. Otto felt the gas sting his tongue, the sugar melt like a promise, and with each bubble, decades of images faded, the glorification of austerity, the pride of deprivation, the rhetoric that held privation as virtue. The contrast was brutal, not an explicit lesson, but a sensory revelation. The enemy's material was not limited to its weapons. It embodied itself in mundane, routine, ordinary things. Things that a regime could not confiscate without ripping the people's daily life away. This tableau did not originate in a vacuum. The landing in Tunisia, the surrender of the Afrika Korps in May, had thrown hundreds of thousands of veterans onto the docks and into convoys. Many of them, broken by the desert and winter, expected the worst: hunger, abuse, revenge. Instead, American rations were offered. K-rations full of biscuits, processed cheese, fruit bars, instant coffee and pancakes, eggs and milk, served 3 hours after surrender as if kindness were a war tactic. A German officer would later say in front of the Red Cross, "We expected to be starved. The Americans fed us better than our own army." This grave and simple phrase began to explain why the small brown bottle had more effect than a leaflet. On the Liberty ships crossing the Atlantic, prisoners were treated, in terms of sustenance, like passengers: fresh bread, meat, vegetables, sweet coffee, and sometimes ice cream. The ice, in the open sea served on July 4th, was a transcendent absurdity. The sea, cold and infinite, saw men who had known hunger holding cups of ice cream in their hands. How could one believe that America was weak when it could afford to give whipped cream to its enemies? Everywhere, the distribution was functioning: refrigerators on the docks, ice machines in the camps, vans loaded with cans and cartons. The prisoners discovered not only supplies, but a system that produces abundance, standardization, quality control, logistics. Words that, until then, had been mere abstractions for them. Every sip, every bite became a lesson. The psychological transformation began, slow as melting ice, relentless as the algebra of production. Otto placed the empty bottle on the table, the rolled capsule between his calloused fingers. Around him, other faces changed expression, from distrust to surprise, from suspicion to guilty pleasure. What initially was a simple gustatory curiosity turned into a metaphor. The fizzy soda was tangible proof that the enemy possessed resources not only military but industrial and social, capable of supporting a normalcy that Germany had lost. The guards, calm, resumed their patrol, while in the prisoners' eyes, something irreversible was taking shape. The lesson would not be immediate. It would seep in through the mouth, the stomach, the eyes. It would replace theoretical argument with lived experience. But for the first time, on this summer morning, Otto understood that war was not only won on the fronts, but also in kitchens and on shelves. And this realization, both sweet and devastating, would slowly change the world he thought he knew. August 1943. Aboard the Liberty ship USS General M.B. Stewart, somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic. The waves struck the steel hull like a drumbeat, steady, powerful, but it was not the roar of the sea that fascinated the German prisoners that day. It was the music of an ice cream machine. In the ship's kitchen, the mechanism was turning, squeaking slightly, and a vanilla scent was spreading, incredible, almost insulting in this war setting. A naked, tattooed American sailor was turning the handle of an ice machine. Around him, 10 German soldiers, still incredulous, watched. They were on their way to the unknown, to that America they had learned to hate. And yet, at that moment, they saw only a metal tank filled with a white, soft substance, symbol of a world they had never known. "Ice! Here! In the middle of the sea!" murmured a German non-commissioned officer, incredulous. "Of course." "Gotta celebrate the 4th of July," replied the cook with a laugh. This surreal scene would be imprinted in the collective memory of the prisoners, the ice slowly melting in a sea of iron. They vaguely understood that it was not just a treat, it was a message. America could produce luxury amid war, pleasure at the heart of conflict. On these transport ships, 3 meals were served per day. Fresh bread, meat, vegetables, sweet coffee, butter. Numbers silently inscribed in the German minds. 3,500 daily calories, more than what German soldiers received at the front. These rations, carefully recorded by American stewards, were not a privilege but a norm. The system produced more than it consumed, a logic foreign to the Nazi austerity economy. When the ships reached Norfolk, Virginia, the revelation continued. The prisoners saw the port extend for miles, giant cranes lifting cargoes of sugar, wheat, meat, machines. What they saw was not a nation at war. It was a nation of abundance at war. In Norfolk, they had their first glimpse of real America. Supply warehouses were teeming with products whose labels shone: Hershey, Nestlé, Mars. In the workers' shops, the prisoners saw rows of chocolate bars sold for $500, the same price as the Coca-Cola they had tasted. The guards, smiling, explained to them that these products were accessible to everyone, that a child could buy as much as a banker. The train journey to Tennessee reinforced the lesson. Instead of cattle cars, the prisoners were placed in compartments with benches and windows. In the dining cars, waitresses in uniform served fried chicken, vegetables, hot coffee, and slices of pie. It was not special treatment, but standard service. This word, standard, resonated like a thunderclap in the German consciousness. Here, quality and comfort were not reserved for an elite. When they arrived at Camp Crossville, astonishment turned into disbelief. The camp stretched over hectares of green hills, with heated barracks, hot water, and flush toilets. In the evening, the prisoners discovered the PX stores, small shops run by the army. They sold everything: cigarettes, light beer, fruits, cakes, but most of all, Coca-Cola and ice cream. Army records indicate that on average, each camp received between 200 and 300 crates of Coca-Cola per week. Prisoners earned 80 cents a day for their work, which allowed them to buy up to 16 bottles or chocolate bars. In Germany, these products no longer existed. Here, they were as common as bread. For engineers and technicians among the captives, this consistency of taste, the identical Coca-Cola from Maine to Texas, was fascinating. They took mental notes, observed delivery trucks, warehouses, logistics circuits. They gradually understood that they were witnessing an industrial phenomenon inconceivable for their homeland, democracy applied to production. Meanwhile, the guards were laughing. They sometimes shared an ice cream with the prisoners, or let the latter work in the kitchens. There, in the cold rooms where ice cream was made, the very idea of hierarchy was melting away. The enemies of the day before observed the recipes, measured the proportions of sugar and cream, and mentally noted the precision of a system capable of producing pleasure like a science. One night, Otto Bauer, still him, wrote in his notebook, "We thought they were weak because they lived in comfort. But their comfort is a strength. Every bottle, every bar of chocolate is a factory product, a logistical victory. Their sweetness is their weapon." In the silence of the camp, the lesson took root. America was not content to win on the battlefields. It also won in minds through the quiet demonstration of its organized excess. The guards did not know it, but every sip of Coca-Cola they left for a German prisoner was an ideological victory, a victory that neither cannons, nor tanks, nor even speeches could achieve. November 1943, Camp Aliceville, Alabama. The humid southern heat had given way to a mild autumn, and in the large mess hall of the camp, prisoners were settling in for the evening meal. The smell of warm bread, caramelized sugar, and coffee wafted through the walls. Otto Bauer, now assigned to the kitchen, was pouring sugar into a large basin. His gaze stopped on a torn bag on the floor, 100 pounds of sugar hardened by humidity. An American cook shrugged and ordered it to be thrown away. The Germans remained petrified. "To throw it away?" Otto asked, incredulous. "Yes, we will receive another bag tomorrow morning." It was unthinkable. In Germany, this sugar would have been steamed, dried, reused. Here, it was discarded without hesitation. It wasn't contempt, it was trust. Trust in a system that produced more than it consumed. The next day, Otto understood what that meant. On the mess hall tables, bowls filled with sugar remained available at will. The prisoners sweetened their coffee to saturation, sometimes just to defy. Sugar, a luxury commodity for them, was here commonplace, almost boring. Hidden within this banality was a terrible lesson. America had turned luxury into routine. The menus now displayed dishes that the soldiers of the Afrika Korps had not seen in years: cakes, biscuits, pies. The army kitchens received weekly sacks of flour and sugar by the tons, and most camps had their own bakery. The enemy, the one who was supposed to embody decadence, proved capable of a daily miracle, feeding everyone, even its prisoners. Thanksgiving Day, 1943 finally shook the certainties. In prisons across the country, from Texas to Wisconsin, German prisoners were served the same meal as American soldiers: roasted turkey, mashed potatoes and gravy potatoes, brown gravy, sweet potatoes, cornbread, pumpkin pie, and milk. Otto and his comrades stared at their plates as if they were participating in a masquerade. "Why are you giving us the same as your soldiers?" asked a German officer to a guard. "Because we celebrate, not because we count," simply replied the American. The figures once again spoke for themselves. Hundreds of thousands of identical meals served at the same time across the entire territory. The logistical organization of this national feast in the midst of war exceeded all European imagination. That day, the prisoners drank fresh milk, a product that had become mythical in Germany. Some wept. Then Christmas came, and with it an even more bewildering miracle: packages from American civilians, parcels filled with homemade cakes, cigarettes, soap, books, playing cards, candies. These gifts came from people who had sons or husbands killed by the Wehrmacht, and yet they sent sweets to enemy prisoners. In Tonkawa, Oklahoma, the town's residents brought biscuits and chocolates themselves to the neighboring camp. In Hearne, Texas, church groups came to sing hymns and offer candies. The psychological shock was immense. These acts of kindness destroyed what Nazi propaganda had hammered for years, that America was selfish, materialistic, inhumane. A German non-commissioned officer later wrote, "I understood that we had lost long before Stalingrad. We lost the day our enemies chose to be better than us." And yet, the transformation was not limited to morality. In 1944, American labor needs increased, and thousands of prisoners were sent to work in the fields, canneries, and factories. Otto was assigned to an agricultural operation in Michigan, where he discovered abundance at its source. The orchards overflowed with fruit. Tons of cherries were harvested every day to make these shiny red toppings, maraschino cherries, that were placed on ice cream sundaes. Otto watched the workers sort kilos of perfectly edible fruit simply because they were too small or too ugly. In Germany, these fruits would have fed entire families. Here, they were used to feed pigs. In the canneries, the Germans observed the American industrial precision, calibrated machines, rigorous health inspections, pace set to the millimeter, and above all, speed. Every day, they produced more than some regions of Germany could produce in a month. Then came the revelation of American schools. Working near the cities, the prisoners saw children leaving at noon to receive a hot meal, milk, meat, vegetables. Some even had ice cream. This spectacle shook their certainties. American children ate better than German soldiers. Each observation added a stone to the monument of misunderstanding. This democracy without military discipline, without uniforms, without fear, still functioned better than their supposedly superior Reich. Otto Bauer wrote in a censored letter before his dispatch, "They say they are fighting for freedom. I understood today what that means. The freedom to feed everyone, even enemies. In the clatter of kitchens, in the cold of warehouses, the old desert soldiers discovered that the American war was fought with utensils, engines, recipes, and with a philosophy, produce for all, consume together, share without fear." Sugar, ice, and Coca-Cola had become tools of re-education, invisible but deadly to an entire system of beliefs. Spring, 1945, Camp Hearne, Texas. The war was ending, but the sweet smell of the canteen remained the same. At the moment Europe was collapsing under bombs, German prisoners in America were gaining weight. Their uniforms, once tight from fatigue and deprivation, began to loosen. In American medical records, a recurring note was, "Health improved since capture." A historical paradox: defeated men, but better nourished than their families left free in Germany. The contrast became unbearable when the first newsreels arrived in the camps. Images of GIs handing out chocolate bars to starving German children, American soldiers offering rations to survivors of concentration camps. The prisoners, sitting in the makeshift cinemas of the camp, remained silent. In front of the screen, they saw the same hands that served them Coca-Cola offering life to walking skeletons. Otto Bauer, in his notebook, wrote, "We thought that the war was won by force. They won it through generosity. In 1946, most were sent back to Europe. Upon their return, they discovered a destroyed, emptied, starving country. Many had gained 10 kilos in captivity. Their families had lost as much. The children they found had never tasted chocolate. So, fathers brought back treasures, Hershey bars, cans of instant coffee, canned meat, refined sugar. These sweets, purchased in American camps, became relics of another civilization. The shock was immense. These prisoners, witnesses to abundance, were among the first to support Reconstruction, the most ardent defenders of the Marshall Plan. They knew, because they had seen it, that American power was not that of an empire, but of a factory, that a society capable of feeding its enemies did not need to enslave its allies. The transformation had been total, almost mystical. They were no longer soldiers of the Reich, but the first witnesses of a new world, one where freedom was measured in calories, sugar, choices. Historians later would put figures to this silent miracle. German prisoners in the United States, 371,683. Average caloric intake, 3,300 to 3,600 calories per day. Sugar rations, more than 4 kilos per month. Ice served regularly during summer. Coca-Cola, 5 cents per bottle, unlimited. In Germany at the same time. Average ration, 1,200 to 1,500 calories per day. Sugar, 280 grams per month. Ice, non-existent. Sugary drinks, none. These staggering disparities explained better than anything the reasons for defeat. Where the Reich glorified sacrifice, America glorified production. Where Nazism exalted purity, the United States celebrated diversity, even in their candies, chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, each free to choose their flavor. The prisoners who had tasted this reality became the architects of a new Germany. In the 1950s, they were found leading companies, factories, and businesses. Many participated in the Industrial Renaissance, assembly lines, standardization, mass marketing, all concepts observed, studied, and internalized in American camps. Thus, almost ironically, part of the Wirtschaftswunder, the German economic miracle, was born. The spirit of Coca-Cola and vanilla ice cream blew over a rebuilt Germany. Former desert soldiers became the first entrepreneurs of German consumerism, convinced that a satiated people is a pacified people. In the 1970s, a former officer of the Afrika Korps confided to a journalist, "We learned more about democracy in American kitchens than by reading all of Roosevelt's speeches. The day I tasted my first vanilla ice cream in captivity, I understood that we had lost the war." And another, more poetic, added, "My first Coca-Cola was like drinking the future." These men understood that sweetness could be more subversive than violence, that America did not need to persuade through fear, but through demonstration. By offering sugar to its enemies, it also offered them an idea, the freedom of taste, the freedom of choice, the freedom not to miss out. In 1949, Coca-Cola officially returned to Germany. Very quickly, cafes and Eisdielen, the ice cream parlors inspired by American soda fountains, flourished in the devastated cities. Ice cream, once a symbol of madness, became a symbol of rebirth. Grocery store shelves filled with chocolate bars, and children who had only known hunger finally tasted the promise of sweetness. Behind this silent revolution were the former prisoners. They knew that the taste of Coca-Cola and the texture of ice cream could contain an entire model of society, a model based not on fear, but on abundance. Decades later, a historian summarized this transformation. The Americans did not re-educate the German prisoners. They fed them, and that was enough epilogue. The story of these men demonstrates a truth that cannons cannot destroy. There are victories without violence. Where force fails, gentleness triumphs. Where hatred divides, generosity disarms. In the tumult of the 20th century, the most powerful American weapon was neither the atomic bomb nor the Sherman tanks. It was a bottle of Coca-Cola, served cold at 500 to a stunned enemy. It was a scoop of ice cream, offered one summer day to a man who believed he would never again know sweetness. Because deep down, this war, the war of minds, was won by a simple idea. that a country strong enough to share its abundance no longer needs to crush its enemies. And in the silence of archives, this truth continues to shine like an air bubble in a brown bottle. Sometimes democracy tastes like sugar and has the texture of melting ice cream,